So, hello, everybody. Welcome to Happy Hour. First, I want to do a very brief introduction. If you look over there, I think you'll see Nicole Tyler, who you may recognize if you have made it out to the tasting room in the last few months. She's a Black Ankle tasting roomer, but also, I don't know, in real life, sign language interpreter. So we have been, as you may have noticed, but we're always trying to find ways to make sure that Black Ankle is available and, you know, welcoming to kind of as many folks as possible. So we were super excited to find that she's fluent in American Sign Language and is able to provide tours and tastings, and when we do tastings again, basically as much of the Black Ankle experience as we can for in sign language as well. So she's practicing today. We'll see how fast those hands can go, because you know how Ed and I can talk fast and at the same time, but she's a professional. So I can see she didn't look daunted yet. So anyway, that's a little housekeeping on the beginning. So welcome everybody. I hope everybody's doing well and ready for a relaxing evening. You may be with the wrong people, but that's okay. We'll try. So we have two main. You don't think Ed talks too fast? No, that is right, Greg. Ed is not the problem. I am aware.
Thanks for having my back, Greg.
Exactly. So we have two main topics for tonight. Number one, we are going to talk about the Barrel-Fermented Viognier. And then also on the agenda is just some background on the tasting room and the construction and why we decided to play with straw and mud to build that building. So as always, questions are great, throw them out there, but otherwise we'll get started. Yeah. So great. I think we should start with the wine. I think it's a day that requires some wine.
I think you're right.
Just guessing. Wherever, yeah. Oh, I forget the label. Let's get down to business. Okay, yeah, did you hold it up so people can see? So.
All right, Barrel-Fermented Viognier. So we made Viognier, let's see, we planted the vines in 2004. So we probably had close to 10 vintages that we made just in stainless steel tank. And we liked all of those Viogniers. But we never really experimented with other ways of making it. And then we started tasting some other Viogniers, and we were pleasantly surprised, I think, by some of the barrel fermented ones that we tasted. So we decided to try it. Our instinct originally wasn't to try it because we loved some of the original Viogniers that we had from Europe and some from Virginia that have these beautiful flowery sort of noses, and they're very aromatically driven wines. And when you barrel ferment, you're getting a little bit of air in through the barrels and into the wine. So what often happens is you lose that air helps create good mouthfeel and creaminess and all sorts of other good things for the wine, but it also oxidizes some of the aromas. And so a grape like Chardonnay is traditionally made in barrels because it doesn't have a lot of primary aromas. It has some secondary aromas, and those are not oxidizable. But the primary aromas, the citruses and the floweries and right, things like that are the kind of things that if you're a fan of Black Ankle Albarino, you'll know that it's a very primary aromatic driven grape variety. And so we are not, we haven't ever tried Albarino and barrel at Black Ankle. We tried a few in Spain, did not like them because they had lost all of the beauty, right, the prettiness of them. That was where we thought of Viognier. And then we had some that had been barrel fermented, and they still had wonderful aromatics. I remember one, a shout out to our friends at King Farm down outside of Charlottesville. They made a wonderful Viognier that we tried with the staff, and it was, I think it was a third stainless steel and a third concrete egg and a third barrel fermented. It was a wacky one. Egg, yeah. But we really loved it. When we talked to Matthew, the winemaker, about it, he said, yeah, we do a lot in barrel, and we're not really losing those aromas. So we started trying it, and that's where this came from,
Where
and,
the
and
idea came
to
from,
the
right.
point where in 2020, I believe we put all of our Viognier in barrels.
This year, yeah, this wasn't a huge crop of Viognier, so we decided to do all of it in barrel this time. So the yeah, so it's a little bit different, but it does seem to hold up more than you might think.
So we're putting a toe in it. The first time we tried it, I think we did 3 barrels.
Figuratively.
Yeah. How do you do?
No
How do you?
actual toe.
How do you? Yeah, it's true. We don't put a toe in. Okay. I'm wondering how you translate "put a toe into it" in American Sign Language. That's kind of
She's
funny.
gotta figure that out.
I was hoping to see your foot go in the air there, Nicole. But okay. Anyway, so yeah, we started with just a couple of barrels, neutral barrels, being a barrel that's been used several times, so it doesn't have as much wood flavor in it. And then we've progressively done a little more. This year we did it all in barrel, and Sarah was brave enough to actually stick one new barrel in there too. So we'll get to taste that, see what we think.
For the barrels, this may seem obvious, but I don't know how much it is. As they age, the first time you use a barrel, you're going to pick up some oakiness. Strangely, when you ferment a wine in barrel, you actually get a lot less oakiness than you would if you fermented it in a steel tank and then put it in barrel. There's something about that fermentation process that absorbs a lot of the more, when we say wood flavors, like the flavors that kind of are reminiscent of toast or bread dough or oakiness. But so those flavors often integrate pretty well as long as you ferment in the barrel. However, a newer barrel is going to have a bigger impact on the wine. As a barrel ages, you still get a little bit of oxygen. You still get a little bit of you still get kind of the weight and the creaminess and the length and the palate sort of viscosity is maybe a little heavier than we get to, but like a little just heft in the wine, even as a barrel ages, but you're not going to have a lot of flavor. So it'll be interesting. We just used one to see what it does to the Viognier. So if you see there's just 20 cases of extra special barrel fermented Viognier, it'll be because it wasn't a good idea.
Right.
Here's the super special. Anyway, or maybe it will be so fabulous that we have to bottle it separately. But
one usually should be fine.
Yeah, anyway, it'll be fun to see what it does.
Interesting to see. Yeah. We tend not to like too much wood influence in any of our wines, but especially the whites. So we try to buy barrels. We don't go to barrels too much. We try to look for specifically barrels that help with the palate weight and the overall feel of the wines, but without adding much flavor. So we're confident we have some barrels that won't be too woody for this one. So so yes, and we made how many? What do we have? 10 barrels, I believe. It's about 250 cases, 225, 250 cases, something like that of
this wine,
of barrel fermented Viognier, which is about double what we have of this one from 19. So it wasn't a huge harvest of Viognier, but it was a lot better than it was in 19, where we got very low harvests.
Yeah. Here's a total plant on my question list from staff. How fast did you sell out last year's barrel fermented Viognier? You can tell when they're actual customer questions and the staff plans.
Even our kids are laughing.
And they knew that I would not know. You can't read my phone. But not only is the question on my list, so is the answer in case I got it wrong, which was 6 weeks. So if you like it, here's your chance to stock up, because there is never much of it. That's pretty funny. Anyway, so there you go. There's my planted question. And I see some people are, off script there, drinking Crumbling Rock or drinking VGV or something else. That's fine. You can drink whatever you want.
But you have to give the rest of us a taste on the Zoom.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially the VGV, which we tasted a month or so. Almost didn't have it. So there was a question about, for the older barrels, do we always use the same variety? And the white barrels, we can't use a red barrel for a white wine, because there is some wine left in the barrel and certainly some color left in the wood, no matter how much you clean it. So, but otherwise, no, we don't really even know which barrels we've used. Did we use them for Chardonnay last year or Viognier? There's very little influence from the last wine.
That's an interesting question, though.
But,
We do clean them like crazy in between.
Yeah.
But that's, kind of interesting to see what would happen if we mixed it up on purpose or some specific way. And I assume that question was about the variety of wine, or maybe it was the kind of barrel. We do use a mix of barrels too, not to get too much into barrels, but we also use, for sure, a mix of barrels from different coopers, because the different forests and the different trees and who makes the barrel will have an impact on how the wine seems. So, in case that was your question, also we have a mix of them, and we don't really. As they get neutral, that impact is less, so we probably worry a little bit less. Yeah. Barrels, we do a rinse and then we sanitize them with steam. So the steam is great because it gets them very clean and it uses only a tiny bit of water and not so much energy. Feldspar, people are way off. That sounds pretty good.
One more question about barrels. It's an insider question about, do we ever use ozone to clean barrels? Some wineries use ozone, which is apparently a very good sanitizer for barrels. We don't like it's dangerous. It's poison. It when it hits open air, it quickly changes back into regular oxygen, but it still makes us nervous using something that is essentially poisonous kind of to human, although it's not, it's not a poison because whatever, but and we also have a belief that you can't really sanitize a barrel anyway. You can clean it and you clean it well, but you're never going to get a half inch or even a whole inch into the stave wood with anything, and the wine can get in there. So the steam does a great job of pulling things out, because that's what steam sort of does, makes a vacuum in the barrel and it pulls things out and cleans it pretty well.
Yeah, and the white wine barrels we'll use for quite a long time. We might use them 5 or 6 times, much more than the red wine barrels. Most of our red wine barrels will fill twice, which means we kind of have them for 2 years because they stay full for 18 months. Or 2 harvests, but the whites we often use a lot longer than that. So again, it depends, but as long as they seem healthy and there's nothing weird that has happened to the wine in those barrels, which will happen once in a while, but rarely, we can use the whites over and over. There you go. So
the question is, does the Viognier go through malolactic fermentation? It has not for us yet. Would we do it? Probably not. Viognier is a little, Viognier tends to be a lower acid weight grape. So when we pick it, it has a little higher pH, usually a little less acid than, say, a Chardonnay, or especially than a Albarino or something, which is, an acid monster. So I would be worried that if we did, we'd end up with a wine that's a little bit flat, and we like the balance of acidity on this. That being said, I'm not sure that, I don't know, interesting. It's a good question.
We love to experiment, so you never know. So I'm just going to do my usual roll back on the winemaking, just talk for a second about what malolactic is, in case that's sort of something that people aren't super familiar with. And malolactic is, it's what we think of as secondary fermentation. So officially, fermentation is the yeast, eating the sugar and creating alcohol, turning the juice into wine. And then there's actually a bacteria that does this transformation, and it turns malic acid into lactic acid. And malic acid is this very kind of sharp, crisp acid. It's called malic because it's from the Latin root malus, which is like the word that you use for apple. And to my mind, it's just think of a Granny Smith apple or some very tart apple has a ton of malic acid in it. It's a very kind of sharp green, bright acid, great in something when you want that acidity and crispness in a wine. So there's tons of it in Albarino, but we want that because we want that brightness into the wine. Lactic acid is the primary acid in milk. So you don't think of milk, or I don't think of milk as being particularly acidic. It's because it's a very kind of soft acid. So it's kind of taking the crispness of the wine and just smoothing it out and softening it out. And basically every red wine goes through that process, certainly all of ours. And I think it's safe to say nearly every red wine in the world goes through it, because you don't want that huge acidity usually in a red. You want some, but you're going to still have that when you're at the lactic phase. But for whites, it's much more of a trade-off in terms of what is the style that you're trying to make. So,
yeah,
back in the weeds, but yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
And one more question to follow up on that from Marty about our Chardonnay. Yeah, we used to not put our Chardonnay through this malolactic process, and now we have changed our tune and we're picking a little bit earlier, so there's more acid in there, and then we're doing the malolactic fermentation, and we like that style better. We're getting a little creamier, a little more body to the wine, a little softer acidity, but still really good balance of in the wine. So,
yeah. And there was an older question about how do we learn which barrels to use? Really through experimentation. I mean, tons of research and reading and talking to other people, but our big move is to just buy a whole bunch of different kinds of barrels and then put the same wine in them, and then really pay attention when we get to the blending phase of how those wines performed, I guess, or how they've grown in different barrels. And the general answer is because we'll usually find 1 year the Cabernet Franc in a certain Cooper's barrels is fantastic, and the Cab Sauv is like, okay. And then the next year it'll be the opposite. So over time, we have learned certain Coopers that we really enjoy, or that tend to always perform well. But we'll never get to a point where we think, oh, we just want to use this one kind of barrel. The mix of barrels always enhances the end wine. So yeah. So in my stream of questions, I have just some questions about growing it. So Viognier is a little bit interesting in the vineyard. It can be challenging. Viognier in the vineyard.
Sure, I can.
Take it away.
So we planted Viognier back in 2004 in large part because we didn't know what would work, and we at Black Ankle, and we had tasted enough Viogniers from Virginia that we thought, okay, we can probably do well with this grape here. So we have 2 acres of it. It is planted mostly on a northwest facing part of the vineyard, kind of up high. And just like everything else, we put it, our vines are grafted with, it's Viognier on top, but it's an American rootstock on the bottom, just like most of the vines around the world. And so you could choose which roots it goes on. And we chose the sort of least vigorous, weakest, I guess is the best way to put it, rootstocks we could for most of the vineyard, because we have a lot of rain, we have a lot of heat. We on the East Coast anyway, tend to have vines that grow too much, and we want to slow them down, keep them in their space, and then make them work on their grapes. So,
and when we were walking around, driving around, talking to growers in this region, and by that I mean from sort of Virginia through New York, the big struggle they had was vines that want to create a lot of leaves, grow into giant monsters, and then make kind of indifferent fruit. So one of the things we can do to help control that is use a very restrictive rootstock. We've kind of learned over time there's a lot more going on than that. People said it was because, we're in a climate that has rain, and so when you have rain, you're going to have these big, super green, super vigorous plants. Having done this now 15 years, a long time, we realize there's a lot more that's in the equation than just the rain. But we started with these super restrictive roots to help kind of just set ourselves up as well as we could. Also, the big reason that Black Ankle is mostly rocks and very little soil, and we've talked a lot about that in the past. But
so in the beginning, we decided we're going to do everything we could think of to slow the growth of our vines down and try to beat this bigger problem that the East Coast had. So the first, as Sarah talked about, we bought a place where there are sort of more rock than soil. It's really a lousy soil, and that's the biggest one. And then we did things like rootstocks. So we can go on for probably hours about all the plans we came up with to slow our vines down. And for the most part, it worked. We have much less vigor than most places around, and it has a huge impact on the quality of our wines. So that's good. Viognier, we did not realize at the time, is among all the big vinifera, common grapevines out there, one of the weakest. So we have a really weak soil. We put it on really weak rootstocks. We had Viognier that would hardly grow. We were getting, most of the vines grow up above the top of the wire, and we have to hedge them off, cut them off so they don't fall over and shade themselves. The Viognier, probably the first 10 years, it never reached the top wire. It just grew a little bit and kind of stopped. And it confounded us for years. And finally, we just realized, wait a minute, this is a weak vine. And so we started putting compost on it. So we have started fertilizing our Viognier. And every year when we press our vines off, our wines off, and we have the skins and seeds and things left, and we go put them back into the vineyard to send them back to the soil, we always give an extra dose or 2 or 3 to the Viognier, because we're trying to get it to grow a little bit more, make a few more leaves, and be able to ripen the grapes enough. So it was a struggle for a while to make. We made some good wines back then, but not as good as the ones we're making now when we've started to correct the problem.
Well, one of the strange things about Viognier is it tends to have this kind of be very cyclical in its yield. So one year it will have a reasonable amount of a crop, and then the next year it will set almost no fruit, and then the next year it'll have a normal crop. And that's something that we've been learning about how to take care of the vine and things that we can do to try to manage that a little bit. And you'll see, I mean, if you're really focusing, you might notice that we have more Viognier one year than another, like that our production swings up and down. And I think it is one of the reasons we decided to split some, to try some in barrel, was to try to make for a year where we had more, to kind of keep the quantities relatively consistent. So we thought, well, we can have a year where we have barrel fermented and regular, and then we'll have the same amount of regular the next year, but no barrel fermented, because we won't have enough fruit, and then we'd switch it up. So it's we're getting a little better at managing that balance, but it is a quirk of Viognier. It's not just something that we see; it's something that a lot of growers see, where there's this kind of up and down in terms of what the vine will set, how much fruit it will put on. Many varieties, we cut back a lot of fruit as we go to manage the crop, but sometimes we don't need to do that because there's too little already.
Yeah, and we've talked about with other growers around here about this issue for a lot of years at different meetings and things, and we've tried there was a while people thought spraying a fish emulsion, it's sort of a natural nitrogen source on the vines at a certain point in the year, would help them get through and set a good crop for the next year. Because one of the things the vine's doing this year, it's ripening its own crop, but it's also creating inside the buds for next year's crop. And when Viognier has a down year, it has lots of shoots. They just don't have any clusters on them. There's just no fruit on them. So they're called blind shoots. It's gotten to the point where I know many of you have probably read over the years, if you're into Virginia wine things, for a while, Viognier was being touted as the grape of Virginia, the future. It was the thing Virginia was going to be known at. I just heard a month or so ago that in Virginia, they're no longer recommending that anybody plant Viognier, because this up and down problem is so bad. I thought we had beaten it actually at Black Ankle. We went through 3 straight really good years in a row. 18 doesn't really, 18 has a good set before the rain came. So I think it was 15, 16, 17. Where we've been adding the compost, we got it set, and we were getting consistently good crops. And I thought, this is great. And then 19 came, and we had another low crop. And then this year came, and we had a huge amount of Viognier again. So I'm hoping.
19 had a low crop on a lot of things. So 19 was kind of strange, I think, in reaction to 18 being weird. Anyway.
So we'll see. So otherwise, in the vineyard, Viognier has a reputation for being a little rot sensitive, because it has these clusters that are sort of what they call tight. It has kind of small clusters with big berries. So you get there is no space between the berries in a lot of these clusters, none at all. Some of the Viognier grapes are literally square, because there's one here and there's another one here, and you can't get, as opposed to a grape like Albarino, where you can put your finger between any 2 grapes pretty much in the whole cluster. They're very airy. And what happens is when it rains in a airy cluster like an Albarino, that the rain just runs off the side, the air gets in, it dries everything out. If perchance one berry gets some rot organism into it, it rots, but it's not touching the ones next door, so the rot can't just immediately spread to the next one. Viognier is not like that. If you get a problem in a cluster, it goes pretty fast. So we would have thought it would be very vulnerable to a lot of things, but it doesn't seem to be. It seems to have thick skins and be tough, even though it's got these compact and tight clusters. So yeah, otherwise in the vineyard, it's pretty good. It does love leaves, and it does love, again, I keep contrasting it with Albarino, but they're kind of opposites in the vineyard. The Albarino grows straight up to the sky, but it doesn't send anything this way. It just, everything goes way up.
Right, it's kind of easy to maintain.
Is like lazy and throws things out to the side, and it doesn't want to go up. It wants to go everywhere but up. So it does take more labor to try to keep it in the space that we want to keep it in, because it wants to kind of wants to go everywhere. So yeah, but and it ripening, it's usually the last of our whites that we pick. Yeah, sometimes we pick Albarino a little bit later, but only because of convenience. Albarino has a very wide window of when you can pick it, gets ripe, and it stays there for a while. So if we're busy picking something else, we just leave the Albarino a little longer and then pick it. The Viognier, but if everything were picked exactly when it wanted to be or when it was best, Viognier would be the last of our whites to pick.
Yeah. Albarino, it is funny, even just one last note on them in the vineyard, the Albarino berries, they're like almost blue. They're so pale. Their color is really dramatically different. And the Viognier are really bright yellow. I mean, bright, but like you can kind of, if you hold the two clusters up next year, we'll remember to hold you two clusters.
Yeah, we should.
You can actually kind of tell them apart. Whereas often, like, it's hard to tell one grape from another, just looking at them alone.
Yeah.
So tasting room, we're getting prompts on the tasting room. So of course, we'll keep doing questions if people have them, but I think we're supposed to talk a little bit about why do we build this crazy tasting room and how is it built? So,
and why is it yellow?
And why is it yellow? That's just because we picked yellow. Because look, we like yellow.
Apparently,
we like yellow. I don't know. It's about the same color. Anyway, so the tasting room. The idea, I guess, behind the tasting room was that a couple of things. I mean, we first got onto the idea of straw bales when we were looking at options for building a winery, and wine wants to age at a very kind of stable temperature in a very kind of calm, dark, quiet place. We did tons of research into building caves, and could we build the cave, and could we use air, whatever. I won't get into all the paths we went down and didn't do, because you'll never eat dinner. But we did look at that as a way to, was there a way, because much wine is stored underground. That's a tradition of growing and aging wine in caves. And just logistically, it didn't seem feasible. So then we started looking at other good options. And I think you found this idea of just building with straw bales, which became popular in the United States, basically on the Great Plains, where there was lots and lots of grass available, but almost no trees. So lumber for construction was just kind of overly precious, I guess. Whereas you could take a bale and build with it as though it were a brick and very quickly build a structure of a building. So it was sort of popularized with that idea. So you can actually have the bales of straw themselves be the structure. For a number of reasons that are mostly about the construction, we didn't do that. We have a wooden frame, and then the bales are just filled in as insulation. But that's kind of why we started on that. So the general kind of skeleton or of the tasting room is that it's post and beam construction. So it's kind of big wide spans, big, what are they, 4x4 posts. So kind of
6x6s, yep.
6x6s.
Yeah.
Posts. And like you would see if you went into a barn, like old style barn construction, where they're big wide spans and as few as possible, as opposed to a whole series of 2x4s in a row, which is how most construction's done now. Those big wide spans allow us to set the bales in more easily. And they also,
and those 6x6, part of our thought process is we said, we're going to grow all of our own grapes. We were the first estate winery in Maryland. That was estate meaning you grow all of your grapes and make your wine from them. That wasn't a concept that existed in Maryland. It existed lots of other places, but not here. So we said, well, why don't we, since we're growing all of our raw materials here, why don't we try to grow what raw materials do we have on the farm for building a building as well? So as Sarah talked about the 6x6s, and all of the framing and things in the building, that is all cut from our property. We have about 60 acres of trees that surround all the fields and things and vineyards you can see from the tasting room. And we went in and selectively cut trees, or we had a logger come in and selectively cut trees here and there for our use, and then got a sawmill to cut them up into boards and things we could use for the tasting room. So that started that whole process where we had wood from our.
Sarah, I am so sorry. I muted you on accident. You're still muted. I am so sorry, Sarah. Let me find you.
We're back.
All right.
So sorry, guys.
Okay.
How much did we miss? So let me just I'll go over the few things I said at the end. We decided we were going to try to build a building from our farm, just like we are growing our wines from our farm. So the wooden structure that Sarah's talking about is cut from trees on our property. The straw bales that we are in that tasting room were all grown in that field right out in front of the tasting room. So, and then the stonework you see around the fireplace or around the outside of the building along the bottom or along the bottom of the main bar, all of those are stones picked up from
out of the vineyard mostly, yeah.
Over and over, we said, all right, well, what do we have? What can we use? The building is sited for directly south with the correct, architecturally correct overhang, so that in the summer, when the sun is high in the sky, the windows in front are all shaded and we don't get sun heating up the building. But in the winter, when the sun is low, the sun streams in those windows and does heat up the building. So we actually have non-low E, whatever, high E glass.
Purposely have windows that let ultraviolet light in,
on the front,
or let heat in.
Which are really difficult to find, actually, custom made.
Because now most houses don't want that, because you don't want any outside, because you're trying to build this really tight envelope and keep air, I guess.
So we got a we got into this and we got some of these ideas, the straw bales, I guess, first, and they use what we have and all that, and then we started searching for an architect to help us with process, because we're not designers and things. And we happened on a woman by the name of Siggy Coco from Earth.
Down to Earth is the name of her company.
Down to Earth.
Buildnaturally.com is her website. Yeah.
And she is a natural builder and a natural building architect, meaning use natural materials. So we went and met with her and we said, well, we love the straw bale idea, but what about, there's all sorts of other things, cob and rammed earth and I don't know, there's half a dozen of these different things you can do with. And she said, yeah, don't do any of that. You'll freeze yourself to death in the winter if you do that. Straw bales is the thing. Straw bales is what works in our environments. We said, great. And she designed this lovely building and really taught us how to do straw bale construction. Most of the building was constructed by ourselves, our crew, our friends.
It's kind of a neat.
The framing and thing was done by professional framers, but the baling part and the
mud,
plastering and the mud was all no, that's a lost art. No one really knows how to do it anymore. So we did it all ourselves, which has come in handy because now we know how to do it. Our crew knows how to do it, and when we build buildings, we can do our own straw work.
Yeah, yeah. So the basic process is we talked about the big posted beam framing, and then the roof goes on, and so that's all done. And then back it up, concrete floor, framing, roof, and that was all done by the professionals, so it won't fall down. And then you just put the bales in, and the bale work is not really anything that there's like people out there that know how to do, and it's pretty simple to do. First of all, the bales of straw are actually those like 4 by 2 by 18 inches bales that you might buy at the landscaping place or see a farmer using, and they're set on their side, so they're set just flat, almost like laying bricks, and you just stagger them as you put them in, just like you lay bricks. And when you're building, it's just going over some of the questions we get a lot. When you're building and there's loose straw around, it's very dangerous as far as fire, because straw wants to catch fire easily. So you have to be very careful with it. Once you have the bale covered in plaster, like the bale itself, if you get the little loose hairs off of it, is very, very fire resistant. Straw bales are one of the highest rated fire resistant materials you can use because they're so compact. So they're wrapped so tightly that there's no flow of air. So you can't get, it'd be really hard to set fire to them. And just the example that our architect gave us, and it makes a lot of sense. If you take a piece of paper and crinkle it up and set a match to it, it'll catch fire like that, because there's all kinds of air available to move that flame around. If you take a phone book, remember phone books?
Remember
Guys
those?
are probably old enough. Yeah. You take a book, a big book, and try to light it on fire, it won't light because it's so dense. So something that could be flammable in that right setup is not. And then once we cover it with the plaster, and the plaster is just mud dug from our lower soil, we screen out all the rocks so that it becomes really very kind of light. And then we add water and a little bit of chopped up straw and mix it together, and some sand.
Yeah.
And then kind of just like rub it into the bales. So the first couple of layers are really not particularly high skilled work. You just have to kind of like squish the mud into the straw, and kind of make sure it's tight, but otherwise they're not very polished. And then the very last layer, where you want the wall to look kind of smooth, that's where we got, some of our crew basically had been plasterers or knew how to do that. So that's kind of a smoother finish.
Yeah.
And that's where like us and our kids did not do that part. We did a few back in the back.
Yeah. Right. We did a lot.
And the bales are fun because you can kind of cut them and shape them and dig, cut holes in them, and they're kind of fun to work with.
Yeah, the one thing you can't do with straw bales very easily is flat or straight, because they're just not that shape. But you can do you can do curves, you can do bumpy, you notice the walls that in that tasting room are not flat or straight, and that's part of why we love them so much. They're just natural more so.
Yeah. So a straw bale, the way a straw bale is made is you have this big long piece of straw, and then it's folded on one side and then it's cut on the other. So the outside of the building, you see those walls are relatively straight. You have to stack the bales so that the cut edges, because that's the much more regular edge, is on the outside. Because on the outside, we put on a lime plaster, which is much less forgiving than the clay. You can only put a really tiny thin layer, like 1/4 of an inch at most at one time. So you want to make sure that the outside is pretty smooth. And then the inside, you can put a whole bunch of mud in at once. So you can, you take the kind of more irregular side of a bale of straw. Who knew so much about a bale of straw? This is too much detail.
Wait, we aren't done with bales of straw yet.
Well, no,
Oh my
we
God.
haven't finished describing the straw bale. Stop asking about the roof.
We have more
Sorry.
bale questions. So,
All right.
so there's a question about, do bales eventually compress and have to be replaced? That's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
So the way our architect explained it to us is the bale wall works as a unit or a system. And the reason you put you use lime on the outside is because mud would wash away in the rain. If you get it too wet, it will wash away. You can use mud on the inside. But the reason you don't use, say, concrete is because you need that, because the enemy of a straw bale wall is water. And so if you get wetness or too much condensation on the inside of the wall, your straw will start to compost. That's what straw does when it gets wet. And there are apparently examples of buildings with an inner wall and outer wall, and all the straw is composted in the middle, and there's nothing until the bottom wall is a bunch of compost. That's it. So you have to be very careful of that. And the mud actually wicks water out of the wall, and so does the lime, less so, but also. So if any water does get in there, it tends to be pulled out by those layers. So those layers are actually helping keep the straw dry. If it's dry, the original straw bale buildings were built in Nebraska around 1850, 1860, somewhere in there, and they are still going strong. And in fact, architects said some of them went out for a conference and looked at one of the buildings, and there was some repair work going on, and for some reason they had uncovered part of the straw to re-plaster it, and someone had brought their horse there, and the horse came over and started as one does, I guess, in Nebraska. And the horse came over and started eating the hay
straw,
out
the
of the
straw,
wall.
because it was so good.
Talk about wine lasting a long time, right? You want to try a 1850 straw bale. The horse probably, I don't know what it tasted like, but so it will last forever if it's built right. Concrete, I talked about just quickly. Concrete is like a sealant. So when you seal those walls, water will get in there. Humidity gets everywhere. That's what it does. And once it gets in there, it won't come out. Right. So you have to be really careful not to put concrete or any kind of sealer on these walls. You want them to breathe.
You have to have one side more dense than the other so that the water, and it's just humidity that flows through. The only real danger to the bales is a roof leak. So the bales are susceptible to water from above. From the sides, they're very impermeable, and it just, again, it has to do with the way that the bales are made, the way the straw goes this way. You kind of can't get water in. In fact, our architect said, again, she's like, you can take a hose and just like shoot it at the side of the wall, even before the plaster's on, and you will not get serious penetration into the bale. But if you go from above, like a serious drip can start to get in. So we have to make sure the roof is always really good. And then the water we're talking about coming through is really just humidity. And we're in a humid place, or even if you were in a less humid place, but you just had a kitchen and you were cooking pasta and water boiling or tea, all of that's just got to be able to pass in and out of the walls.
Yeah, and no problem we could make the tasting room as humid as we want. It wouldn't really affect the walls. The danger is, and we've had work with this on some things like down in the barrel cellar. For instance, if you have something metal going through the wall, steel, the temperature changes at a different rate than the straw or wood would. So you end up getting one thing cold and one thing a little bit warmer, and so you get condensation on the cold thing, and you will get condensation on a piece of metal going through the wall, and that will keep that part of around the metal
you'll start humid, to get it around that,
and you'll start to compost. It'll start to take the wall down. It's crazy what the little things you have to try to figure out, but if you get them right, the wall lasts forever.
So there was a question about the counters. So are the counters locally sourced? Yes and no, I guess is the answer to that. Okay, moving on. No. So the counters, so when we were building this building, I think Ed mentioned, we kept getting ideas and new things we could add from our farm and how to use them, and sort of our hierarchy of construction material choices was from our farm. And then the second was kind of locally sourced. So for instance, the ceiling inside the main tasting room, we had dried a bunch of trees, but we hadn't thought about a ceiling. So we didn't have quite enough wood. So the wood on that ceiling is actually from a tree that had fallen down in Cunningham Falls State Park, and the sawyer that we worked with had it and had it dried and ready to go. So it was a local tree, but it was not our tree because we didn't think far enough ahead on that one. So ours, and then local, and then kind of, I don't know what's the right word, green or sustainable or kind of environmentally friendly. Those was like the third choice if we couldn't use A or B, because A and B were all also very environmentally friendly kind of inherently. And so when it came to countertops, we were trying to come up with things to do and thinking about counter options. And there was a company, which unfortunately is no longer in business, but they made countertops from recycled paper. And at the time they had a few colors. There was kind of a greenish color that was old money, shredded money. And they had a grayish color that was newsprint. And there was a whiter one, which was other kind of recycled paper, and a brown one that was grocery bags. And so they had this kind of family of papers, and you could choose kind of their different products to get the colors. And so we just got thinking about it, and this had to be a you idea because it's so crazy. Yeah. But we said, what is the common thing nowadays? It's basically wood pulp. What are you? Yeah, the idea. So we were like, hey, we grow a lot of wood pulp. We generate a lot of wood. Like maybe we could come up with a way to use that. So the guy who had started the company had invented this process. He was kind of an inventor, engineer, liked to come up with ideas. Type person. So we reached out to him and said, hey, could we send you some chopped up grapevines? And we also ended up sending some pumice. So the leftover skins and seeds after fermentation. We just sent a bunch out to him and said, play around with this and see what you can do. Would you make us a custom counter? So he did, and he ultimately did find a way to put it all together. So what's in the counters is did I miss it? No, is our vines, and then some skins and seeds, all that were kind of put in his big pulper, and then they're just compressed, and and then they're just kind of, it's not varnished, but they're sealed to make them a little smoother. Yeah. And so then we shipped our own stuff out to him, and then he sent it back to us. Yeah. So
do you remember the day we got that sample? We sent it off. Yeah. It was I can't know, a few $100s or something to do the trial. We said, all right, let's try it. Let's just send it off. And then we got the sample back, and it was in the box. We said, all right, we should look at this. And we opened it up, and we almost fell over how cool it looked.
We thought it was cool.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys like it, but you can't design anything that looks like that. That's just like nature going nuts. Yeah. And it even has, we sent them some cuttings from the vineyard, and we use these staples to staple the vines down to the wires. And there were a couple of staples in there, and they ended up,
they're kind of squished,
If you know where to look, you can find there are 2 staples in our countertops. Anybody wants to go on the treasure hunt next time you're there. Right. So that was really cool. We said, can you make this the whole thing? So
So critters. There was a question about critters. So again, as long as the walls are well sealed, there's no more problem with critters than anywhere else. If you get a hole, then suddenly everybody wants to come move in there because it's very cozy if you're a mouse or a spider or something, but ideally no. And then a question on repairs. The repairs are actually kind of simple because you're just dealing with mud and stuff. So it's hard to make a repair that is totally invisible, because the sealant over the plaster, it's funny, it's an oil, and it doesn't patch well. It's linseed oil. So it's made from flaxseed. And I don't know why they call it linseed. It's whatever. It's grown, it's out of flax. It's called linseed. So you can fix something well, and it's no problem. It'll seal, it'll be fine, but you'll always see where the little patch is, but that's okay. We've got a few. You can see where there's been a few cracks just from the building settling or something, and you can kind of see where where it's been repaired and sealed again. Because unlike paint or something, where you can patch paint, and as long as you have the same color, it'll blend very well over time. The linseed oil just doesn't work very well.
Question: why did we decide on the green roofs? That was. They're kind of cool. We've seen one. I'm like, that's kind of cool. And architect loves them. I guess the upsides to those are, it's nice to have the roof. They really do 2 major things for you. one is you get 60% of your heat gain through your roof. So when sun hits your roof, that's really heating up your sun in the summer. And so that when you put plants on there, I mean, it helps if your roof is white or a light color, you reflect more, but the darker it is, the more it absorbs. When you put plants up there, it cuts that to zero. The plants absorb all of the heat and none of it comes through to you. The claim is that the plants, as they respire water, actually pull heat out of the building. I don't know how much it is, but
10 degrees cooler than ambient temperature on a hot
There you go.
day.
All
Come on,
right.
haven't you been on my tour?
there's the expert. Right?
I don't know. That's what I thought it was.
Yeah,
I
that's
thought
great.
it was right.
Yeah, it's probably right. I don't know. And then the other big thing that they do is they delay the stormwater. So when you get a big storm, you get this huge amount of water and it all runs off at once. And that's when you get erosion and things that we don't really want, we being the county and state and us as well.
Yeah.
So when you have a green roof, the first flush of water, most of that water gets absorbed by the roof. And then it takes some time to actually release it. So it slows that whole process down. And that's really good because it gives you, after the storm, you're getting all this rain running off, but that's fine. You don't have the big washes that you have. So.
Right. Yeah. And for somewhere like we are, where we have a huge, we have this building in the midst of a huge field, there's plenty of space for any rainwater to be absorbed into the grass before it gets into the waterways. But the green roofs are particularly great in a city or in a place, in a place where you have lots and lots of roofs and you're missing, there's so much less ground to impermeable surface left. So if you can absorb some of that on the roof of a building, then you have a lot less pollution that gets washed into the waterways and kind of adds a lot of benefits. Less of an issue where we are, but still it's kind of nice. Yeah.
And it's kind of strange, but those plants on our roof are all of a species called sedums. And it was the opposite of what I thought. I thought you would want to put all this soil up there that absorbs a lot of water, so they have it, so they can last when it gets dry. And it's the opposite with these plants. They are so adapted
desert plants,
to soak up all the water they could possibly soak up and then survive for months without any. That you put a very, very light soil medium up there that absorbs almost no water at all. And then when you get weeds up on the roof, they'll grow for a little bit. And pretty much if you look at our roof, you see anything tall, it's pretty much a weed. There are a few of the sedums that send up shoots, but anything tall is a weed. But then you get about 2 weeks of dry and all those weeds just die.
They don't last
But the
so much,
sedums don't. They love to, they will, the guy that sold them to us said you could take these and take them off the roof and put them on the driveway for 6 months and half of them would still be alive.
Well, and we basically did that when we rebuilt the back porch. So what's the patio between the buildings in the back? There was a much smaller porch on there that had a green roof on it. For you super old timers, so remember that. In the olden days, it's only been about 4 or 5 years now, and it had green plants on it. And so we took them all off and stuck them in the corner. And then when we built the new roof, but it was the next spring before we put them back on, and most of them were fine. It's amazing. They're all succulents. They're pretty cool.
They're amazing.
Yes, there are probably green roofs that shouldn't be green roofs.
Yes.
Plants will grow. Plants will grow.
Yes.
The other benefit of
moss doesn't count.
but it's cool. It's cool. The other benefit for us of the lighter soil is that if we had this huge thick amount of soil, water is very, very heavy. So you'd have to have an incredible structure to hold it. So the light soil and these plants are relatively light for a roof. They're maybe slightly heavier than a metal roof, maybe comparable to a shingle roof, but they're a lot lighter than they would be otherwise.
And then there's a question about, was it a challenge to sell the county on this? And we were dreading that. And it turns out there was a wonderful person in Adamstown who had built a straw bale house and had been taking the county through the whole thing. We walked in to say, well, the county said, well, we want to build this building out of straw bale. And they said, oh, straw bale, we know all about that.
Well, in the building, I remember one of the guys in our meeting who was one of the construction inspectors. He's like, oh, I used to build with bales in my grandpa's barn. And that's cool. You know, so it had all been, the fire people had a question, but again, there has been research done on that. So we had that citation. So it was shockingly easy. Many other parts of the permitting and construction process were shockingly hard.
Yes.
But getting the straw bale, which we thought would be hard by, they actually accepted it pretty quickly. And now we build with it all the time. And they're like, okay, yes, check, another straw bale building. So it's not so shocking.
We are, if any of you have been out to Black Ankle lately, you may have noticed that the red barn has disappeared.
Yes.
The red barn is gone. We took it down and we are going to build a new storage facility for our bottled wine. We call it case goods, we call them. Case goods facility there. It's going to be much bigger. It's going to be built out of straw bale. Once you get the bug of building out of straw bale, it's hard to get out. It's a wonderful way to build. And if you have the space, because you do lose quite a bit of indoor space because of the thickness of the walls, it's just a great way to build. And especially for a case goods storage facility, which we have to keep cool all summer, straw bale it's really better than any commercial insulation you could ever buy. It's just fantastic insulation. But the bales that Sarah was talking about before, the regular bales that you would buy at the farmer's market or at the nursery or something. They're good insulation, but they're not as good insulation as the 3 foot by 3 foot by 8 foot straw bales that we are going to use to build the new building, which is then 3 foot wide straw bale plus plaster. It's going to be almost a 4 foot wide wall.
Deep wall,
4
right.
foot deep
It'll be
wall.
like going to a medieval castle, walk in there,
It's going to be a little wacky, but the reason we're going to do it that way is we need to build the building pretty tall because we need it to store a lot of wine in there. And because they're so wide, it's much safer to build with something wide where we can stack and not have the danger of them falling over during construction. That's a problem with the smaller bales, building them tall as you get these wobbly walls while you're building it. Once they're up, they're great, but in the building. So we're going to do these, stack these up with the forklift, I think, putting them in like Legos.
Be an entertaining project.
So in the spring, look forward to some fun with straw Legos in the building.
And sorry, Bill and Lynn, I think you asked a long time ago, but yes, live edge, of course, we're going to have to stick with our favorite kind of construction. So there's the only thing that's built there so far is a barn, which doesn't have any insulation. So it's just, it's live edge wood, but it's not insulated. But when we build the actual buildings that we will occupy, we'll definitely be we're working with the same architect, and we're trying to come up with a few different twists. So you feel like you're in a different place, but it will definitely be straw bale construction.
Yeah, it will feel like Ed and Sarah.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's all we know how to do.
Because we're not very good at
trying to do something else, and we couldn't come up with anything.
If we had to be actors, we would starve. We're pretty much us.
Exactly. So I feel like we're kind of running out of time, and I have a million questions left on my list. We're going to have another construction conversation, I think, because otherwise we'll keep you on forever. So it's 6:30, so I'm going to run through my quick logistics, and then we'll have to have tasting room construction part 2 in, I don't know, some other time, some other future time, if people are still interested, because we find it interesting. We're the ones
That's
talking.
all that matters.
All right, so the next happy hour is December 3rd. And we are going to talk about Terra Dulce, and we're going to talk about port and the history of port and how it got invented and why we decided to make it and all of that. So for whatever reason, I always feel like the Terra Dulce is kind of a wintry wine. I feel like you should always be drinking it by a fire, which is silly because then you can only drink it so much of the year. But in my mind, it seems to go together. So somehow that felt festive for December. So we'll talk all about that. So bring all of your port and fortified wine questions next month, December 3rd. So we're sticking with first Thursdays of the month, again at 5:30. And not the day after tomorrow, but the following Saturday. So November 14th is second Saturday. We have a musician who's Dave Huber, who maybe many people will know. And then we do have a food truck, and it's Trippy Tacos, which I had a couple of weeks ago. I thought they were great. So if you're interested in a second Saturday reservation, because we really do reserve them for our wine club members, you should just email Karen or info@blackangle.com, and then we can make a reservation for you. We don't do it through our usual reservation system because we only want to let wine club members in, and we don't know how to do that any other way. Let's see, what other logistics should they send me? Fire pits. So we have bought a whole bunch of fire pits. We're still expecting a few more. So if you are interested in having a fire pit, our plan is to stay open all winter. You can make a reservation with a fire pit. We do charge a fee for firewood. So it's $20 for regular people and $15 for wine club members, regular or whatever, non-pit members. And you can use your fire all day for that. We just realized we in one afternoon used like 1.5 quarts of wood, and we just thought, oh my gosh, we just can't sustain this with this many people. So sorry for that, but we do have to do that. And it's all like part of your reservation. So it's pretty simple, but that's that. And to go with the fires, we have a s'mores kit with special, I think Cupcakes and Company is making a special cookie to go with it. And we have our blankets and, bundle up. I'm even knitting, I don't have a sample. I'm knitting little sweaters for the wine bottle so your wine doesn't get too cold. We don't have too many of those yet. Because I'm crazy. So we're doing what we can to make it as comfortable as you can. We are committed to just only outside still, because that just feels safer still. So, you can come in to use the bathrooms as always, but our reservations are still going to stick 100% outside. So we'll see. We'll see how winter goes. We'll hope for some nice days there. And also just a fun thing that we are doing, I think we've talked a little bit about it already, is this chocolate pairing. So if you're familiar with Gingy chocolates, if you have been out before and tried them, they're our kind of go-to chocolate maker. It's a woman in Baltimore who makes the chocolate, and her father comes and helps out and makes the deliveries. And I find it adorable because he just is clearly so enamored of her and what she's doing. And he comes and he's like, Gingy did this and she's got that, and she makes great chocolate. And we have, I always have a soft spot for chocolate, and I particularly like the people who make it. It's a great business. And they have been hit hard by closures and COVID and not so much business. So we did a little while ago say, we're going to set up a special pairing. So we got a bunch of their chocolates, and we've always sold them just to, had them in stock, or always for a few years now. But now we have sat and designed a special pairing. So to go with our flights. So the white wine flight, the red wine flight, and the mixed wine flight, each has its own pairing. The name is Gingy, I guess. Yeah, looks like somebody just put that up there. So it's Gingy chocolates. The pairings are super fun. So if you're interested in that, we can add them. I think can we ship them? I don't know. We could certainly deliver them if we're delivering wine, or you can always have them if you're out at the tasting room. So that's kind of a fun thing to add. Okay, and then last of my, I think, logistics are, we are for these colder days also doing soup. So we've been working with Atwater's to bring in soups, so you can have kind of a cup of soup at the when you're out at the vineyard. And the current offering is black bean and sweet potato soup. So, and then we get soup, and we have gluten-free rolls and regular rolls to go with that. I think those were all my logistics. So. Oh yeah, we're gonna have, there's a million more tasting room questions, but they're gonna have to wait. How is this? Oh good, Rick liked the soup. And you made it back for happy hour. I was worried when I saw you at the farm, but I made it back too.
And okay, quick word on harvest.
Oh,
we're asked about, and we're winding up. We have the very last, I think, 3 fermentations still going, or 3 wines still on its skins. Everything else is runoff and barreled. And it's lovely. We're really happy with it. We've been a very good year. And
Not
Standouts.
going to hear a lot of good things about 2020 in general,
Yeah.
but the harvest.
It was a good year to farm at Black Ankle. In
Yeah.
fact, it was not a great year to farm at a lot of vineyards around us, but we dodged pretty much all of the problems and ended up with a really good year. So we're very thankful for that. And the whites are all uniformly really good, really good. And I think among the reds, we'll see. They're all very, very good. Although I think that the two cabs, Franc and Sauvignon, really kind of stand out a little bit. They were excellent at tasting. You never know what happens 18 months from now,
Right.
but they were really, really good. So yeah, we're looking
So
forward
that's
to it.
exciting. Yeah, great.
Yeah, excellent.
So I think that it covers everything. Oh yeah, happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Oh yeah.
We're gonna get, so yes, I think any
Happy
other
Happy virtual Thanksgiving.
virtual
for a lot of us.
Thanksgiving. I know. Everybody's gonna, whatever, we'll figure it out. So great to see everybody. Thank you for tuning in again. And we hope we'll see you all for real or virtually or in some form or another soon.
And yeah, Nicole, you don't need to do any arm exercises
I
for
know.
like a month
Well
because
done.
gun show. Excellent.
All right. Bye,
All right.
everybody.
Thank you all.